All right, it's 2 o'clock, and we'll just wait just a couple minutes. Hi, Ryan. Good day from Spokane. Yay! One of my favorite people lives in Spokane, and now I know two wonderful people. All right, so we'll wait just about 1 or 2 more minutes. But while we're waiting, please open the agenda. I put the link there. Open the agenda and leave it open on a separate tab, because we're going to be referring to it, and it has lots of resources for you and all sorts of good stuff. So also, I do not have a co-host today. Amy, whose picture you see there, is my technical person, but she's helping me and helping others. Hello, Woodenville. Hi, Jennifer. So please don't put anything in Q&A. She might see it or she might not, but I will see things in the chat, and I will we'll have some time during the day, and I'll look at the chat and good stuff like that. Hello, Richland. I'm from hi, Bellingham. I'm here from ESD 113, and that is in Tumwater, which is right next to Olympia. And I happen to live on Hood Canal, up by Shelton, if any of you know where Shelton is. Hi, Christy. Hi, Erica. Hey, Katie. Vancouver, you are in 312. So you have a fabulous ESD coordinator. Her name is Gaia Owl. She is amazing. Hello, Leticia. Lake Taps, Bonnie Lake. All right. Hi, Christina. Hi, Christy. I don't know where Warden is. Need to look that up. Hi, Erica. Yakima. I used to breed and train and show Labrador Retrievers, and we had the best show. My favorite show was in Yakima every year. So I love that. Hello, Evan. Hello, Rebecca. I am going to just close my door, so I'll be right here. Port Hadlock, that's nice. Okay, looks like we have a lot of people here, so I think we'll get going. I want to honor your time. Thank you so much for choosing my session. I know that you have so many others to choose from, and they're all fabulous, but you chose to come here, so I hope I can make it worth your while. So I would like you, at the moment, to think of, what do you know about UDL in one word? Do you know everything? Do you know a lot? Do you know a little? Do you know nothing? Do you medium or something like that? So before you put that in the chat, wait, because I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to have a chat waterfall, so to speak. So I know everything about UDL. I know something about UDL. I know a lot about UDL. I know nothing about UDL. And what the heck is UDL? So now ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Tell me how much you know. Something, just a little. Oh, good. Lots of training. Somebody said lots of training in UDL in the past year. I haven't implemented it in my classroom yet. Okay, nothing, something. What the heck is UDL? This is exactly very good. All right, good. So Jenna and everybody else, tomorrow I will have 2 sessions about actually creating a lesson plan using UDL strategies. So just kind of put that in your mind. Okay, so for those of you who know nothing, and for those of you who know something and a little, what we are having, hi Donna, what we're having today is the 10,000 foot overview. So for those of you, Erica, who know quite a bit, that's great. You are very welcome to stay, of course, and see if there's something you didn't know or whatever. But like I said, we're not going to get into the heavy duty nitty gritty. That takes quite a bit of work and study and practice and things like that. What we're just going to do is look at the overview of what the heck is UDL. All right, and who the heck is this person? I'd like to know. My name is Elise Belanger Bailey. I work for ESD 113 in Tumwater, which is right next to Olympia, and I live on Hood Canal. We just moved into our new house. Ta-da! And so if you see boxes and things hanging around, that's why. So about me, I have a PhD in special education administration and instruction. Which just means that I like to pilot higher and deeper, read a lot, and do research. That's all that means. Oh, good. Always learn new things and refresh. Yay. So I have been a head of school, a head of middle school, a director of student services. I have been a principal, a teacher, and an educational therapist in private practice. So if any of you want to know about education therapy, it's a burgeoning field. Go ahead and look it up, but not right now. All right. And here we go. So this is OSPI has asked us in the IPP project. I am one, by the way, that's right. I am one of 9. I'm an IPP, Inclusionary Practices Project Coordinator. There's one of us in each of the 9 ESDs in Washington State. And so at the end, I will be giving you a way of contacting the one in your ESD, or if you want to, you can contact me directly. That's fine, we'll get on. Anyway, OSPI has asked us to please make sure that we do an ensuring educational equity statement and a land use statement. So that's what we're doing right now. Ensuring educational equity goes beyond equality. It requires education leaders to examine the ways current policies and practices result in disparate outcomes for our students of color, students living in poverty, and students receiving special education and English language learner services, students who identify as LGBTQ+, and highly mobile student populations. Ensuring educational equity requires education leaders to develop an understanding of historical contexts, engage students, families, and community representatives as partners in decision-making, and actively dismantle systemic barriers, replacing them with policies and practices that ensure all students have access to the instruction and support they need to succeed in our schools. Today, those of us representing OSPI respectfully acknowledge that the agency is located on the traditional lands of the Squaxin Island Nation, descendants of maritime people who lived and prospered along the shores of the southernmost inlets of the Salish Sea. We ask each of you to show gratitude to the tribal nations where you are currently located. We acknowledge the commitment of all Pacific Northwest tribes to the resurgence of their traditional ways and their respect and protection of all peoples, not only those who are living, but also those who have gone before and those who are yet to be born. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, and to a valued resource the tribes have defined as their children. They are the tribe's future. They are the future for us all, and we raise our hands to all sovereign tribes who have stewarded these beautiful lands throughout the generations. So our logistics for today, we will take approximately 85 minutes, and we will be going very quickly. I will put it one more time. Yes, Leticia, you will be able to see the presentation. You'll be able to see the presentation later, and they are going to record this. Oh, Erica, I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that. Please open the agenda, and the link is up above in the chat. Keep it open, and we are going to refer to it. The links on the agenda should be good for probably 2 years or more. Thank you, Amy. Should be available for several years. So they're pretty public, and this agenda that I have made should be available to you for as long as I have my Google account and all that good stuff. Okay. During the slides as we go, you will see an icon such as this one right here, for engagement, representation, action, and expression. I will explain what those are to you in a little bit, but they sort of represent UDL. And this is a note of a UDL strategy, which I will explain at the bottom of each slide. I have made this presentation, in fact, all of my presentations are based on a UDL framework, which you're going to learn about. So you are experiencing universal design for learning right now. Here are our objectives. I want you, and I'm hoping that you will walk away with a working knowledge of universal design for learning, also called UDL. Learn about the 3 networks of the brain: affective, representation, and strategic networks. Become familiar with the UDL guidelines and how they can guide our practice. Notice that the UDL strategy says engagement, being clear about the goals of the lesson. I am one of those people where if you're going to teach me something, I need to know what the end product is before you explain anything. A perfect example of this for me is geometry. I was great in algebra, worked every time, was great, could do it, no problem. Then I got into geometry. Now, granted, when I was in high school, it was in the days of papyrus berry juice and stone tablets. But what they did was they had us write proof after proof after proof after proof. And I'm saying, why? Why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. How about if I just agree or stipulate that Euclid was right about triangles and all the other stuff 3,000 years ago? Why do I have to do this stupid thing? Well, if my teachers had said to me, Elise, writing proofs is a very good form of learning how to logically sequence things and all that good stuff, I would have said, okay. I wouldn't have been thrilled about it, but at least I would have understood it and I would have had a context to put this in. Now, as you can see behind me is a little quilt. I love to quilt and sew, and I've been doing it since I was 6. Had my teacher had UDL on his mind when he framed this work, but of course he couldn't have because it wasn't invented yet, he probably would have said, oh, Elise, I see that you quilt. Let's study geometry through quilting, because I use geometry all the time. I have to know how many squares do I need? How many of each shape? How much area will that take up? How big will my quilt be? How many blocks do I need? So forth and so on. If that had been how it was explained to me, can you imagine how excited I would have been? All right. So here's a question. Why universal design for learning? There are 3 key principles of universal design for learning. UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, is based on 3 principles connecting children and families using multiple means of engagement, supporting multiple means of representation, and employing multiple means of action and expression. You might think of this as assessment. You'll see these 3 themes come up over and over and over again as we dig into the networks of the brain and the UDL guidelines. So you'll notice the UDL strategy at the bottom of the slide. Notice that I have put the 3 different statements or words in colors. And those colors are very important. Green will always be engagement, the why of learning. The why am I learning this? Why should I care? The representation will always be in purple. That is the how will I convey this information to my students? How can they access this information? So how will I represent the information? And action and expression is how will my students know that how will I know that my students have learned the material? Does everybody really have to write a 5-paragraph essay? Is that the only way to judge or assess things? I don't think so. So, like I said, you'll see the themes come up over and over again, and it will be very obvious to you shortly as to why I've chosen these colors. UDL shows us the barriers to learning can be reduced through thoughtful design. UDL acknowledges that the barrier is in the environment, not the learner. When these barriers are removed, all students can succeed. Here is one of my very favorite people, Shelley Moore, and I'm sure she has finished it by now, but she was working on her PhD in special education at the University of British Columbia in Victoria. And so one of the ways that we can remove barriers is by designing to the edges. And we're going to explore this topic more later today, but for now, we're going to watch this short video that introduces the big ideas of UDL and how it is beneficial for all students. And we will learn more about learner variability shortly.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with development. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10.
Oops, sorry.
And you have a lane.
That didn't work.
Bowl any pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball is the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins are left standing. We often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and our kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They threw the ball down the lane and it curved. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, so how am I going to explain this to you? But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't know, is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split, and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball is the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins are left standing. We often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2.
Dang it! Hang on, I'm sorry. I've been doing this for 2 days and I have not had a problem. Why am I having a problem now?
My name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia. Bowling. How is bowling and our kids who need the most challenge? So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They threw the ball down the lane and it curved. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with universal design for learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
I apologize. Thank you for your patience and your grace. Not sure what happened. Shelley Moore, you can see this video and all of her videos on YouTube. Notice it's spelled Moore. She also has a wonderful series of videos called 5 More, Moore, 5 More Minutes. Please, I encourage you to check them out. They will really expand your thinking and give you some refreshing. So what is UDL? I can tell you, UDL is not a curriculum. It is not a set of books. It is not something that you package and they can send you a package and now you're doing UDL. UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is a decision-making framework. It's how we decide what to teach, what strategies we'll use. Universal Design for Learning fits in with MTSS, DI, Direct Instructions, or SDI. So, but it is not the same thing as MTSS, PBIS, DI, or SDI. It is a system of strategies. It's a proactive instructional design process. And as we go further, you will understand more about what that means. Okay, come on. Okay. You may be saying, oh yes, well, we've addressed our learner variability and we do differentiation or MTSS or SDI. But in reality, each of these is different and they all have a place where they can work together. There are a lot of acronyms and jargon floating around that can be confusing. And I want to call out that and talk about the big ones that come up when we are trying to talk about the big ones that come up when we're trying to place UDL within the context of what we already know and what you may already be doing in your building. You can see on the graphic that UDL wraps around the whole structure of multi-tiered systems of support. It addresses equitable access in academic, behavior, and social-emotional domains. And we'll dig a little deeper to see how the pieces fit together. Okay. What we want you to take away from this slide is that all of these things are nested within each other, and there is a place for each of them, and none of them are replacement for the other. UDL is not a replacement for MTSS, but it is a tier 1 strategy because it is appropriate for all learners, which is why it is a beautiful approach for inclusionary practices. That being said, some students might need that deeper tier 2 and tier 3 intervention, which is where our differentiation and SDI comes in. What is the difference between MTSS and RTI? Response to Intervention, or RTI, was added to IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, in 2004 as an alternative evaluation procedure. The goal of RTI was to provide screening for all students, deliver academic interventions, monitor student progress, and use the students' responses to those interventions as a basis for determining special education eligibility. ESSA distinctly references multi-tiered systems of support, but there is no reference to RTI. In fact, they are two distinct tiered approaches. While RTI focuses on direct services, supports, and interventions for students at risk, MTSS is a systematic approach that addresses conditions for creating successful and sustainable system change while also supporting students and staff, as opposed to a reactive model that responds to student achievement as student achievement declines as a rationale for resources and services. MTSS puts the onus on the system, not the student, and is proactive in getting all students what they need. Our next activity should help clarify the difference between UDL and differentiation. We're going going to dig into understanding what UDL is through the use of analogies. Rather than me sitting here and showing you a framework, which we will get to because it's important, I'm going to give you an opportunity to explore multiple ways of understanding exactly what UDL is and, importantly, how it is different from differentiation. This is a buffet. Woo, yummy. Now, suppose you had a bunch of friends over. Now that we can all get together, you're having friends over, and you make a beautiful lasagna. And it's got meat in it, beautiful spiced Italian sausage. It's got homemade lasagna noodles. It's got tomato sauce. It's got cheese. It's got all sorts of yummy things in it. And you make this, and you set it down in front of your friends, and you say, ta-da, isn't this wonderful? And all of a sudden you notice that several of your friends aren't eating. And you say, why? What's wrong? And they say, well, I don't eat cheese. He doesn't eat cheese. Okay. I don't eat wheat. I need gluten-free. Oh, okay. I'm allergic to tomatoes. They really give me hives, and the spices wreak havoc with my ulcer. Oy vey. Now what are you going to do? Aha! A different way to approach this would be to provide a buffet with several different types of dishes that different types of people can eat. You might have a fish dish. You might have a vegan dish. You might have, you get what I'm saying, a vegetarian dish, things like that. Things that people can choose from. So they find something that satisfies them. Your students are the same way. The UDL strategy here means multiple means of representation or delivering content is one of the 3 pillars or foundations of UDL. Go ahead and read this for a moment. UDL is a framework for proactively and intentionally making decisions. It is not retrofitting content. Think about the bowling pins video we just watched. We are proactively designing to the edges. We're taking into account the pins on the edges. UDL facilitates planning about environment, materials, and instruction so that the needs of all students are considered. I want to emphasize again that UDL and differentiated instruction are not the same thing. Here are some of the ways in which they differ from one another. If you want to revisit this, the dinner party analogy from the last section is very helpful. Universal design is proactive in that you think about the learners you have and the barriers that they already have. You do not present a lesson and then, oh, Johnny needs something different. He needs a 2nd grade worksheet. He needs something like that. It's classroom driven. What do all the students in your classroom need? Not just 1 or 2. Because as we know, many times you have students who do not qualify for special education services, but they really need some support. Somebody may have dyslexia. They may have dysgraphia. They may be ELLs. They don't quite qualify for special ed, but they still need some extra support. It removes the barriers, and as the way SDI works around the barriers. So you give somebody a simpler worksheet, or you say, since you take longer, you only have to do 10 instead of 20. It's a workaround. UDL removes the barriers from the beginning, from the design. And it plans for students in the margins. What we said about teaching to the edges whereas DI makes adjustments for students in the margins as needed. I'd like you to do a moment of self-reflection about yourself. What barriers did you face during your school years, kindergarten and beyond? And it could be kindergarten all the way through college. It could be right now. What are some of the barriers you faced? How did you cope with those barriers? Notice the cope is in green. Green means engagement. How did you engage with the material or the lessons when you had a particular barrier? What do you wish your teachers or parents had known? And again, the note is in purple. That means the representation. What would you have liked them to know about how to teach you? And what do you wish your teachers or parents had done? For instance, in assessment. What if you have dysgraphia? What if you have dyscalculia or dyslexia or things like that? And you're tasked, or you're an English language learner, and you are now tasked to write a 5-paragraph essay. That's one of the standards. What are we going to do? And self-regulation is a vital component for UDL for all age groups. And what we mean by that is being able to get through tasks and have the resources to complete tasks. I'm going to give you an opportunity to explore the resources about various students. For this independent research time, please look at the very top of your agenda and find the section labeled Independent Research 1. You'll see a few resources that you can look at. Choose one that looks most interesting to you, one that you've seen you would connect with or you're very excited to learn about. You will have about 5 minutes to explore, take a bio break if you need it, and we will come together to put our thoughts in the chat. All right? As you explore, please think about these things. What are your key takeaways? And how did the resource you chose affect your thinking or understanding? The UDL component here is giving choice on the pathway and pace of your learning, providing a variety of modes for resources. All right? We will come back at 2:38. Begin. Meanwhile, I will look at the chat and am open to the to that. Where do we get the agenda? That is a great question. I will put it right now in the chat. Thank you for asking. You are probably not the only one. Oh, Amy beat me to it. There we go. Yay. If you do not complete the whole video or anything else, that's okay. We are kind of strapped for time in that this is a presentation that normally takes 2 to 2.5 hours. So I've kind of cut down on the discussion time, things like that. All right. If you would stop wherever you are, again, I apologize for cutting you off, but you will have access to these after the presentation, so it won't go. Oh, you like the ice cream analogy. Oh, good. Showing different ways. The baked potato analogy, that's awesome. I love that one. And we can give opportunities for learning and showing learning without sending our students out of the room for different services. Exactly. That's the idea. Keep all your students together as much as possible. Just keep them in the room, but teach to the edges, not to the average. Thank you, Jenna. You are absolutely right. Thank you for responding in the chat. If you would like to answer the questions, that would be great. Just a moment. Just a minute here. Anybody else? Yep. Isn't it wonderful understanding with analogies and stories? It makes things so very clear to us, doesn't it? And many times when we use analogies, we use simpler vocabulary. So a lot of children who may not have the vocabulary that others have, or English language learners, can still relate to them and understand. Playing for the margins instead of reacting to them. Exactly, Karen. Thank you. Wonderful. Choices versus options. Those are not necessarily divergent, but they can be the same thing. Provide options, provide choices. Very good. Well, Nicole, excellent. I did the same thing. EAs. EAs are sometimes used incorrectly and they should be better used within the classroom. In this case in Canada, EAs refers to educational assistant. Most of us still call them paras. However, I think of them as teachers. They are every bit as important a teacher and need this training as well. Thank you. We'll go on here. There we go. All right. Now we're going to actually learn about the UDL framework. What is it? And all this good stuff. We're going to start with a video. And I have had trouble with this one before, so hopefully you can see it. I am going to put the link in the chat directly to the video, just in case for some reason you can't hear it or see it. Okay? And our UDL strategy for this is there's no such thing as an average student. This is an excerpt from a longer video. I suggest you enjoy it, and it's very powerful. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm trying to get the volume louder for everybody.
Right. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases, and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot,
Why does this keep happening?
typically, pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fits for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong it is and what it's possible. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots. He measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. You know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? Means no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. Doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile, and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem. And their response was bold. They banned the average. Meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size. Meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever. But here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom. Here's what I mean. Even though we have one of the most diverse countries in the history of the world, and even though it's the 21st century, we still design our learning environments, like textbooks, for the average student. No kidding. We call it age appropriate, and we think it's good enough. But of course it's not. I mean, think about it. What does it even mean to design for an average student? Because a student is not one-dimensional, like struggling to gifted. Students vary on many dimensions of learning, just like they vary on dimensions of size. Here are a few obvious ones. And just like size, each student, every single one of them, has a jagged learning profile. Meaning they have strengths, they're average at some things, and they have weaknesses. We all do. Even geniuses have weaknesses. But if the fighter pilot example has taught us anything, it's this. If you design those learning environments on average, odds are you design them for nobody. So the real question to me is, how do we get these adjustable seats for learning in the hands of every student as fast as possible without spending more money? Here, I actually think the Air Force has given us the formula for success. What if we ban the average in education? We know it destroys talent. Instead, what if we demanded that the companies that sell these materials into our classrooms design them not to the average of dimensions of learning, but to the edges? It would be a bold move. It would certainly send a strong signal to the market. The game's changed. But trust me, if we do this, not only will we increase the performance of the kids in our classrooms today, we will dramatically expand our talent pool. Because right now, there are so many students we simply cannot reach because we design on average. Design to the edges, and we will reach them, and we'll get their talent. The good news is, we don't have to anymore. I'm telling you, we have a once-in-a-lifetime chance right now to fundamentally reimagine the very foundation of our institutions of opportunity like education in ways that nurture the potential of every single individual, and therefore expand our talent pool, make us far more competitive in the world. We can do this. We know the formula, and it's time we demand it. Thank you.
Pretty amazing stuff, I think, and I see several people in the the chat have agreed. I highly recommend, excuse me, that you go ahead and take a look at the whole video, and I put the link for it in the chat. So, the goal of UDL, the purpose of UDL, the object of the game is to create learners who are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed. In other words, the goal of UDL is to create what we would call expert learners. To reach this goal, we have to embrace learner variability. As our earlier analogy showed us, there is no one-size-fits-all approach because there is no such thing as an average student. Just like in the video you watched, just like each pilot had variability with their body measurements, our students have variability in their learning, and this is true for all learners. Even though students have learner variability, there is some consistency in how students learn, and that is the foundation of the UDL framework. For learning to occur, you must turn on all three networks of the brain. We'll review these three networks and why they're important, and then you'll have a chance to do some deeper learning on your own with in our research time. The affective network. This is what we call engagement. This is responsible for the why of learning and helps us be motivated to cope and control our emotions. If we aren't engaged, if we don't understand the importance of what we are learning, it's likely we will not persist when we are challenged or give up simply because we are bored. Now, this happens to both your high cap students and your students who need the most supports and everybody in the middle. Students must understand the object of the game. Why should they learn this and why should they care about this? The representation network is responsible for the what of learning. It helps us make meaning, decode, and comprehend. So when we are presented with materials, information to consume, it helps us to make sense of it. The strategic network, represented in blue, is also responsible for the how of learning. It helps us plan, organize, set goals, and express ourselves. In order for learning to occur, all three networks must be activated. If one network shuts down, the whole system fails to function. These three networks of the brain are how the UDL guidelines are organized. We'll explore these a little bit later, but here's your key takeaway. The UDL guidelines are broken up into three columns. The principles, which are these, and the three rows, like a matrix, these three, and you'll notice on this side it says access. How do I access? How do I build? And how do I initialize? Forgot to write that down. And again, the purpose is to make expert learners. And expert learners are defined as learners who are purposeful and motivated. They want to know something. They're excited to know something. Resourceful and knowledgeable. We teach them how to find out what you want. Many of us just say, Google it. And strategic and goal directed. What are they going to do with this knowledge? How will it help them? The three principles of the UDL guideline are to provide multiple means of engagement. Number two, provide multiple means of representation, how they will consume this information, how you will present this information. And the third is to provide multiple means of action and expression, the ways to your students show you what they learn. Active engagement relates to the affective network, the why of learning. Representation, as we just said, related to the recognition, the what of learning, what do I want them to learn. And action and expression is related to the strategic network or the how of learning. Here's a question for you. As you think about your teaching right now, and please, this is not a time to feel bad. This is not a time to feel guilty. I'm not trying to say if you're not doing these, you're not a good teacher. You are. You are a highly effective teacher. That's why you're here and because you want to get better. Facilitating engagement and independence assists the student in the present time and the future, particularly by activating curiosity and teaching perseverance. Providing multiple means of engagement is the why of learning or the motivation for learning. The affective networks of the brain determine how learners get engaged and stay motivated and how learners are challenged, excited, or interested. Affect, or emotions and feelings, impact student learning. To aid student learning, it is important to establish non-threatening and welcoming environments. This is where our CRT, our culturally responsive teaching comes in. You would use those strategies to help engage your learners. This network relates to engaging students or making the content interesting or, most importantly, relevant to students. It also relates to self-regulation, a necessary skill for students to persevere when learning is a challenge. Skills that require self-regulation. These are 13 skills that require self-regulation, but not the only skills. As we review these, I challenge you to find one skill that is not needed for learning, either academic or social. You probably can't. For any of these, we can imagine how a student's learning is derailed when they struggle with that skill. On the flip side, we can also probably think of many different ways that students self-regulate. Mastering these skills won't look the same for every student. This is the what of learning, and it engages the recognition networks of the brain. Children perceive and understand information in many different ways, and the way that information is presented to them matters. Students may also need information to see information differently depending on the content. For example, a student might do fine in reading a fictional text, but for that same student, listening to the text for a more technical subject might, like chemistry, work better. Our ways of processing information can be variable, not only by learner, but also by content for the same learner. It's important to remember that all these ways of presenting and consuming information are valid. Some questions we might consider when we think about how we present information. How do I routinely present information to students? Do I stand and deliver and lecture? Do I provide a variety of materials? Do I provide visuals, etc.? Do I provide visual supports for students? Pictures, words, icons, things like that. Do I represent the same content in multiple ways? Do I use technology? Do I use real objects? Do I use the same level of prompting? First, for example, an actual demonstration. Then maybe a sign or a picture, and then verbal. The recognition network is highlighted in the portion of the screen, and this is the cerebral cortex back here. It processes information, makes sense of information by putting things into categories. New brain imaging shows that people with ADHD have more and denser neural connections, making it more difficult to access and process information. This is the how of learning. Might be thought of as assessment. How will I know they've learned the content, and how will they demonstrate? Learning is a proactive and expressive endeavor requiring skills in strategy, organization, and communication. We can allow for multiple options and avenues for how students demonstrate their knowledge and skills. This is going to be especially important this school year, giving students options for how they show what they know not only strengthens engagement, but it also allows for flexibility, which is really necessary in remote learning settings if you are still in hybrid. Go ahead and read this for just a moment. While the way students are expressing their learning may change and the overall learning goal does not. If students need to be able to identify plots, settings, and characters, they can demonstrate that through writing, oral presentations, dioramas, or other pictorial methods. We maintain high expectations and goals that reflect our standards, but we allow for multiple ways of getting to that goal. Here are some examples of how to offer some flexibility within the learning objective. First, example in particular demonstrates how we can find flexibility even within an objective that at first glance feels limiting, the language of speaking clearly. But you can see there are a variety of ways to help students meet that goal without everyone doing exactly the same thing. Notice something about each one of the learning objectives and each one of the different methods, they all start with a verb, an action. When we tell our students the action we want them to take, that contextualizes it for them and gives them a picture and something to focus on, a goal. We're going to take another 5 minutes for a research break. We'll do the very same thing as we have in the past. And as you explore, I'd like you to think about what are your key takeaways and how can understanding the networks of the brain support our work with students and adult learners. All right, 5 minutes. I'll see you back here at 3:06. Yes. Nicole, you are absolutely right. That is a wonderful story. Thank you. The educational setting matters. How we present information matters. How students can access what we want them to read or hear matters. My own grandson, Nicole, who's 15, has some learning issues and barriers. But like your student you're talking about, he made huge strides when he was online. That was his environment. It really worked for him. All right, take a moment, if you would, please, and respond to some of those questions. What are your key takeaways? How can understanding the networks of the brain support our work with students and adult learners? Or anything else you'd like to share? Anything else you feel is appropriate right now? Thank you, Nicole, for your anecdote. My son had ADHD with severe anxiety, and it really impacted his learning. And so for us, putting him on medication when he was in middle school just really helped him. He rose way up in the class standings, his learning, and now at 35, he has learned his cognitive functions. He recognizes and has learned and internalized strategies for dealing with it, and he doesn't take any medication anymore. He's been off it for probably about 10 or 13 years now. Okay, seeing no new things. Digging into the guidelines and some specific examples of what leveraging these networks is what we're going to do in this section. This is what the overall framework looks like. And I know that it's probably pretty blurry. However, I gave you a link to the framework down at the bottom of your agenda, so you can open it later and you can see it whenever you like. I'll give you a tour to orient you, and then you'll have some time to explore it on your own. Okay. As we just learned, the 3 principles of the UDL guidelines are: provide multiple means of engagement, provide multiple means of representation, and provide multiple means of action and expression. These principles are grounded in the 3 networks of the brain we just explored. Each principle has a goal, and together these goals lead to expert learning. That is the goal of education, but especially UDL. Below each of the principles are 3 guidelines, which will take some time to explore. Beneath each of the guidelines is a series of checkpoints or reminders for how we can provide options according to each guideline. Each principle has a related goal. The primary goal of UDL is to develop expert learners, and expert learners are learners who are powerful, purposeful, motivated, resourceful, and knowledgeable as well as strategic and goal-oriented. As leaders, this idea of expert learning can apply to adult learners in our professional learning sessions as well. Let's orientate ourselves to the framework before we start digging deeper. You can see here how the individual pieces we just reviewed fit together. The principles form the top row. The guidelines form the bottom 3 rows. And the checkpoints provide specific information about what and demonstrates each guideline. One last point. In its vertical design, the framework is organized from external, starting at the top, to internalize at the bottom. These stages are labeled as access, build, internalize. For example, in the engagement column, access begins with recruiting interest, which is an outside action. It's something the teacher is doing. When we move to building that engagement through sustained effort and perseverance, the teacher might be providing lots of ways to facilitate that, but the student is an active participant and is doing lots of work to sustain and persevere. Lastly, the student has internalized self-regulation. Again, the teacher is setting them up for success, but this is really coming from within the student in a large part. So as you review the framework, just note that you can read it vertically to dig deeper into a specific principle or network, or you can read it horizontally to see which options of these 3 stages of internalization across the networks. So options for creating access across engagement, representation, action, and expression as an example. As we come to the conclusion of our time together, we're going to take a final 5 minutes to explore the recesses pertaining to the framework. For this independent research time, please look at the very top, at the bottom of your agenda and find the section labeled Research 3. Again, choose one that looks most interesting to you, and we'll have 5 minutes. As you explore, think about how can the UDL guidelines support educators in creating options and choices for minimizing or eliminating barriers? Do you feel like one of the UDL principles is more important than the others? Why or why not? What is self-differentiation, and why is it key to the UDL framework? How can you provide more options and choices to the teachers and leaders that you support in order to encourage self-differentiation? The UDL component here is giving a choice on the path and pace of your learning, providing a variety of modes or resources. All right, 5 minutes. I'd love to talk to you more about supporting effective networks is exhausting. I'd love to talk to you more about that. Collaborating and parallel teaching, absolutely. Jenna, you are exactly right. They are part of a triangle. All 3 are important, and if you only do one, or the others aren't as effective. You're exactly right. Well, we can't function without, if we take off 1/3 of our brain, our functioning probably won't be very good. Shelley, that is exciting. I'm glad you said that. I can also help you, if you wish, to plan your PLC meeting using UDL guidelines. UDL guidelines are great when they're attached to staff, when they're attached to adults, children, everybody, anytime. And they would be great if they were attached to directions about how to put stuff together, like stuff in our house. That would have been great. But yes, there is a whole module about that. How to make the PLC UDL friendly. Okay, you should be finishing up right about now. And please go ahead and share out your feelings. But also, I would love to That's right, Katie. Excellent. I would love to hear some definitions of self-differentiation. Self-differentiation. I don't want to assume that everybody knows what that is. Yep. Always ask yourself a question when we should be planning from the UDL website. Exactly. I like that he broke down and gave examples at all grade levels on examples of how to allow self-differentiation without being overwhelmed. Exactly. That's huge. This allows students to choose their own way to complete the task that is meaningful to them and allows you to assess if they have understood the content. Kristen, that is the heart of UDL teaching. That is the core. Also, how you can improve your planning and teaching. Exactly. All right, we're pretty much to the end, but I do want to take some time. If you have some questions or comments that you'd like to make in the chat, now would be the perfect time for that. Are there sample videos of actual student-teacher lessons that show examples of these ideas? That is a great question, Shelley, and actually there are not, because when they show what UDL is a planning process. UDL happens before the lesson is taught. When you look at teachers using UDL strategies, what you see first and foremost is, wow, that is great teaching. Wow, how do they let those kids make their own choices? Doesn't it make them crazy? And things like that. Once you understand UDL itself, then you can watch a video and say, that's a UDL thing. If I were planning to use UDL, I would add this. I would use this strategy or not. Things like that. And I'm very happy to talk to you about that at length. The other 8 coordinators and myself around the state are putting together some videos exactly to answer that request, because you're not the first one to ask. But if you'd like to be in contact with me, then I can help you with that. Can I plug monthly webinars? Our July, August webinars? Yes, we'll be on UDL and blended learning presented by oh, that would be great. Would you like to tell us what WAETAG means for those of us who don't know? Not everybody knows. All right. Let's go this way. Let's turn down this way actually first. Oh, perfect. Jen Flo at ESD113 is she is the guru, she is the goddess of that for gifted and talented. And UDL supports gifted and talented people. Excellent. Oh, good. I'm so glad you know Jen. She's one of my favorite people. I'd like you to take a moment right now and answer in the chat. I used to think blank about UDL, and now I think blank. I used to think blank, now I think blank. You only need 2 words or little phrases, but go ahead and put that in the chat. Self-reflection is an integral part of UDL, and we can ask everybody to do it from kindergarten all the way through adults. All learners need to experience and develop the skills of self-reflection. So go ahead and put that in the chat. Impossible, and I can. Yes, you can. Exactly, you can. Thank you, Leticia. That is super. I used to think that UDL was complicated, and now I think it's doable. It is very doable. Once you learn about the research and everything, which is a much deeper dive, you will find this easy to do. I think UDL was similar to differentiation. No, it is not, but now I think there's a big difference. You are exactly correct. One more thing. Now I know it's critical. Exactly, Shelley. It's not one more thing, but it's a way to use all the things that you know. It's a way of using strategies and resources. So all the learning you've done before is applicable to UDL. You will not throw out anything. You will not waste your time. About it? I think it's very important. You're right, Evan. As I told you, the Inclusionary Practice Project is a statewide in Washington, and our legislature has provided funds to support us and schools to do this. So what we have done, our 9, have developed 12 modules, and you can pick and choose among them with deeper dives. They can be presented synchronously or asynchronously for you and your schools at no cost. So for instance, if your school wanted to start talking about UDL, learning about it, mind you, I didn't say start and do it, just learning about it. You can call one of us and we will be very happy to provide your staff or your leadership with that training. It's our time is paid for. The resources are paid for. It's absolutely free. If you want to, oh, thank you, Jenna. If you would like to take advantage of this, and if you're in a leadership or whatever, and scheduling doesn't allow, you can use your ESSA funds and several other funds to pay teacher stipends for additional work. You can pay for all this with your ESSA funds and all that good stuff. But the learning, the teaching is free to all of you. So if you'd like to know more, please go to the AESD website, and I put that link, I believe I put it in the agenda. If I didn't, I'll be upset. Here are our regional coordinators. You cannot actually click on this, but they are at the bottom of the AESD homepage. So you can find these online. You can click and get in touch with any of them. If the link doesn't work, if you need some more support, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will help you. I will guide you. I will do whatever it takes to help you learn and implement this in your teaching. And you can implement it by yourself. You do not have to implement it school-wide. Tomorrow, I will be offering 2 back-to-back sessions about UDL lesson planning. What does it look like? What does it entail? How do you do it? Also, if you want to learn more and implement this, you do need to dive deeper into each of the various elements. Okay. The presentation at the moment is not available to share. I have not made it into PDF and things like that. However, if you would like to email me, I will be able to have that done by Friday at the latest, and I'll be very happy to share the presentation with you. All of the links and resources are yours on the agenda. Again, I hope that the links will keep going. If they don't, email me and I will take care of it and get on it right away. You will hear back from me as quickly as possible. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for your time, your attention, but mostly thank you for your interaction. Usually when we do these, we have 2 hours and we are on another platform which allows for breakout time, small discussion, and large discussion. But that's okay. This is great. I'm excited to reach out to all of you. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and I really hope that you're excited and on fire. Actual duties teaching, I'd like to watch. I'd like to see how teachers allow for, oh, exactly. I see what you said. What does that look like at any given lesson? How does the teacher monitor, support those students who require a different type of lesson? Yes, I want to see the balance. Exactly. Shelley, contact me and let's get together and we will make this happen. You're welcome, Teresa. Christina, thank you so much. Jennifer, I appreciate you. Christy, I appreciate your thoughts. And Shelley, thank you for your support. Yaha!